What's going on, everybody? Coach MccDann here. Placement and spacing is not a very well understood concept for some Smash Ultimate players. Today, we'll be going over the Footsies archetype, a category that prioritizes this concept with each character that it's represented within it. Footsies characters, in comparison to other characters, have similarities that other archetypes have, but don't necessarily have those characteristics to put them in that category. While relying on traits such as focusing on making the most out of interactions, as well as having the ability to maneuver safely without making their characters vulnerable, there is a lot of benefit to learning Footsies characters. While some characters in this archetype are typically considered to be more of a rushdown playstyle, like Roy, most of the characters that are included in this archetype specifically capitalize off of any interactions that are dealt while grounded on stage or on platforms. From what we can understand with Footsies characters, there's some characters in this archetype that give a little bit more leeway with how most characters in this archetype usually perform. In a situation where you'll be playing Diddy Kong, you won't have to adapt to a playstyle for a character like Ryu or Ike, but yet, both of these characters are still categorized in the same archetype due to one comparable trait. So with all that being said, as we dive into that trait and what else Footsie characters have to offer, familiarize yourself with one by playing against one of the characters you're comfortable with and set a CPU to one of the characters you see on screen now. While playing a Footsies character, keeping in mind what options your opponent is making plays a fairly large role this time around. Throughout most of the Footsies character's gameplay, you'll benefit most of the time off of overly aggressive interactions from your opponent to garner a lot of the damage you'll get in most games. It's kind of misleading with a name like Footsies to be playing characters that mostly wait for interactions, isn't it? Where did the community get the name for this archetype to begin with? You're probably asking. We'll get more into what sets these characters apart from other characters we've talked about in previous guides, but let's actually answer that question first. Knowing now that what we have discussed about Footsies characters involves good spacing with movement and attacks, as well as properly punishing an opponent's opportunity to strike with an aggressive option, what Footsies characters thrive off of comes from the interactions they make for themselves when dashing in and out of grounded interactions on stage. This is why for most Footsies characters, you'll tend to notice a trend of how a majority of them are characters that don't exactly get the most benefit from being aggressive in the air. You can also notice a trait that a good majority of these characters are from other various fighting games as well. Pretty neat, eh? While some Footsies characters struggle to create situations that set their opponent up for a massive increase in damage, their advantages actually come from when the opponent is already in a disadvantaged state, like above stage, trying to recover to ledge, as well as when the opponent doesn't have a lead in stocks or percentage. Footsies characters do an exceptional job at maintaining a safe balance between keeping the distance they need to not be put into disadvantage themselves, with each character also having various projectiles and special options to push that boundary even further. We see the most benefit come from Footsies characters when the player dashes in to box the opponent with the intention of getting a true combo that will guarantee a certain amount of percent or even in some cases a stock. And finally, retreating back to reset their neutral position, of course. This trait can be easier for some characters and a bit more difficult to execute on others, as depending on your character of choice, there is plenty of room for error, so it's best to adapt to a playstyle that is more preserved when choosing a character in this archetype. Bottom line, getting time to understand when there is a time to act in a fight is a key factor to know Footsies characters play. Alright, we just went over the Footsies archetype. This will help you determine going forward what a match will seem like involving these characters in the future once you come across them in battle. Playing 3 to 5 games against a CPU level you're comfortable with, as well as selecting a character from this category you've played the least of, will not only build your knowledge on that character matchup, but allow you to get a general understanding of how all these characters in this archetype perform.